I'm going to turn it over to our judges now.
Great, thanks, Jenna. Hello, New Mexico. Welcome to the national finals and congrats on being here. My name is Caitlin Johnston. I am an attorney in New York City, and I am also a We the People alum. I did this when I was in high school, growing up in Indiana. Did not make it to nationals, so you've already bested me, so the rest of this is going to be easy. Very much looking forward to our discussion today. Good luck.
Good afternoon. I'm Ed Murphy. I'm a Superior Court judge in Tacoma, Washington. And I want to extend my congratulations to you for being in the national finals and wish you well and look forward to hearing your presentation. Thank you.
And I am Edward Volpe, an attorney in Denver, Colorado. I want to congratulate you on what you have accomplished through your hard work during these 2 semesters. I wish you well in the competition, and I look very much forward to your comments today.
And would you please introduce yourselves and your teacher?
Hi, my name is Ava McDermott. My favorite court case is Marbury v. Madison.
My name is Dominic Lopez, and my favorite case is Tarkasa v. Watkins.
My name is Evelyn Hosteller. My favorite court case is Griswold v. Connecticut.
My name is Lucas Marshall. My favorite case is Riley v. California.
And I'm Zari Peralta. My favorite court case is Miranda v. Arizona, and we're all sophomores from Cottonwood Classical, and our teacher is Mr. Bill Torres. And as you heard earlier, we're from New Mexico.
Great. Very good. Thank you for the introductions, and thanks to your teacher for prepping you all. I'm going to read question 2 all the way through. When I stop, you can start, and that will start your clock. A Bill of Rights is what the people are entitled to against every government on earth, general or particular, and what no just government should refuse or rest on interference. Do you agree or disagree with Thomas Jefferson? What are the advantages and disadvantages of a national Bill of Rights as compared to state bills of rights? What are the differences between positive and negative rights, and which are more important to the preservation of liberty? You may begin.
Hamilton asked, why has government been instituted at all? Because the passions of men will not conform to the dictates of reason and justice without constraint. The Bill of Rights has preserved the rights of individuals and the livelihoods of Americans many times. To prove this, we can look to almost any court case where an element of the Bill of Rights came in handy to give someone or a group some form of freedom where they may not have had it otherwise, such as West Virginia v. Barnett, as well as its precursor, Minersville v. Gobitis. When both eventually made their way to court, the Supreme Court decided in favor of Barnett on the basis of First Amendment rights provided to Americans by the Bill of Rights. Another example comes in the form of Atkins v. Virginia, an Eighth Amendment case regarding the death penalty, where it was decided that sentencing mentally ill people to death would be a violation of the Eighth.
Furthermore, Carpenter v. U.S. is another scenario where the Bill of Rights saved someone's freedom after it was decided that evidence to be used against Carpenter was illegally obtained. After looking at these cases, it is clear to see that the Bill of Rights saves Americans from oppression often, and it is absolutely certain that the people of this nation are entitled to one. The Bill of Rights is possibly the most important piece of writing in American history, but it's often compared to and put against our state's Bill of Rights. In reality, all of these documents are supposed to come together to create an efficient system between both federal and state powers. Brown v. Board 2 proved this when the court delegated the feds to enforce its decision with, quote, deliberate speed. A broad national Bill of Rights worked well to fix urgent issues quickly. However, a state's Bill of Rights allows the government to be more specific to an area's certain needs.
For example, the state case is New Mexico v. Kevin Crane and California v. Warren. Both cases have to do with the Fourth Amendment and the constitutionality of searching a garbage can without a warrant. In these cases, the garbage cans were both readily available. The Annam court sided with Kevin, while California ruled against Warren. This is despite the fact that both states' search and seizure amendments are very similar to each other and to that of the Fourth Amendment. Another similar case was debated on the federal level, California v. Greenwood, where a garbage can was searched on Greenwood's curbside, which was readily available. This demonstrates how the federal and state governments sometimes differ and coincide on their interpretation of the Bill of Rights as pertaining to its sector. These advantages and differences were purposely engineered into our government to force the federal and state powers to be balanced. This is apparent with the 10th and 14th Amendments establishing a strong relationship between the National Bill of Rights and state powers. Each core in essence is free to be its own laboratory of democracy, catering to its environment and its people.
Dr. Ian Scoble described the difference between positive and negative rights. Quote, fundamentally, positive rights require others to abstain from interfering with your actions, whereas a negative right, on the other hand, only requires others to, totally messed up. The First Amendment starts with Congress shall make no law, thus the big five are negative rights, as illustrated in the United States v. Ekman case. After the Texas v. Johnston decision, Congress passed the Flag Protection Act of 1989, which made it illegal to burn flags, trespassing on grounds that Congress is not allowed on. The U.S. sued Eichmann for burning a flag at the protest, and the courts ruled in Eichmann's favor. However, a positive right requires others to oblige you with a service or a good. And this is proved in the Sixth Amendment, which says in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall have the assistance of counsel for his defense. This is a positive right because the government must oblige you with a counsel if you cannot afford one. Although the wording of a right is incredibly important, it is impossible to determine which one is more essential to the preservation of liberty.
Therefore, both positive and negative rights are essential to the preservation of liberty, and it is foolish to place one above the other. In summation, we agree that the Bill of Rights is something all just governments require. We acknowledge the differences between state and national Bill of Rights, and certify they serve different purposes under the same system, thus are not comparable, and the difference between positive and negative rights is whether the government must abstain from something or obliges you with another, and that neither version of each right is less important to the continuation of liberty. We are now open for questions.
Great, thank you very much. Right on time. Please put your notes away and we will move to the follow-ups. And I will start. So let's take free speech as an example. What limits are placed on rights in the Bill of Rights, such as freedom of speech? What limits are there?
There are limits such as place and time and manner, because government, although it cannot control the message being presented by protesters, it can limit, for example, the normally given example of you cannot shout fire in a movie theater. There are limits to where and when you can say it.
There's also limits on whether you're inciting violence, but those ones have to be based on probable cause and at a certain time.
Thank you.
There are also limits regarding speech whenever it comes to defamation and libel, in which someone's reputation can be considerably tarnished. So really, we for sure have a right to speech, but there are some limits that we do need to consider, although there are very few limits.
Great, thank you.
Also, regarding to like the Fourth Amendment, because we've been talking about speech mostly as of now, but I feel like, you know, probable cause to look, like for example, if you were in a car and they obviously saw drugs in your car, then they would be allowed to go inside your car because they have probable cause to look. Or, you know, there's exemptions where you don't need warrants, which is very essential to the Fourth Amendment and privacy as a whole.
What is the difference, if any, between rights that are added through the amendment process and those that are established by a court decision?
Well, that goes back to judicial review and like judicial power, I guess, in a sense, which is heavily controversial. And the main difference is that those that are established by amendments are voted on by people that are elected by the people of the United States, Congress, which means that in some ways they can be more representative, whereas a judicial branch is selected by the president, which is elected by the people, but there is still a much bigger disconnect between those in comparison to senators and representatives.
Can positive and negative rights come into conflict, such as the duty to give up personal freedom to serve the common good? And I'm thinking of the military draft.
I suppose with that one, the specific wording in the Constitution says that Congress has the right to raise armies and have power over the purse, essentially. In which case, that's a positive right to the Congress because it gives them a specific right rather than saying this is something you can't do.
I think another way both positive and negative rights also come into contention are that although government has to abstain from something and gives up another, there are definitely for example, a positive right being you have the right to counsel, it has to offer you the, pardon, it has to offer you right to counsel. It has to give you an attorney in case you can't afford one. But you also have the right to fair trial, meaning government must abstain from collecting evidence illegally.
Great. What circumstances, if any, would cause someone to lose the rights that the Bill of Rights affords them, or any rights that they have in the Constitution? How can those be lost if they can't be?
Well, I think if you commit a crime, and this goes to like philosophical stuff, if you commit a crime, you're basically breaking the social contract, which means that you won't really, I don't think the government has to oblige you with those rights anymore because you broke the, the rules, I guess, the social contract, and you aren't looking out for the common good, the society.
Should all of your rights be taken away if you commit a crime?
Personally, I don't believe so. I don't think it's morally right to treat criminals as subhuman. I understand some things like criminals not being able to partake in Second Amendment privileges, gun ownership, and to some extent, voting becomes a little more of a hassle when someone is a felon or has a prison history. But I think it's morally wrong to strip all rights from someone, especially if they've committed a smaller crime. I just don't think it makes sense to treat someone as subhuman.
Do you think felons should have voting rights?
I think they should. I don't know about repeat offenders, but I mean, a felony can be a lot of things. I mean, going over 30 miles over the speed limit can be a felony, and I think if you get caught for going 30 over once, you should still be able to vote.
I disagree with my partner in that aspect of whether people who have committed crimes get voting rights. I think it definitely depends on the crime specified. For example, there's the big difference between, like you said, a speeding ticket or intoxicated driving, which I think it would definitely just have to depend on both what each state decides and what the crime entailed.
Well, I think once you've served your time, if you're not provided your full rights, I feel like that could be considered a cruel and unusual punishment, in my personal opinion, because that's taking away your personal freedoms. So I don't think I think we should give ex-felons the right to vote.
So going back to the 14th Amendment, which says rights cannot be taken away without due process of the law, there are a lot of discrepancies and problems with our justice system. So you could argue that for a lot of people who are said to be committed these crimes and are put into jail for punishments may have been wrongly accused, evidence that was, because justice systems aren't always right. And so the idea of completely stripping somebody of their rights forever doesn't seem morally correct.
Can you give me one right, whether it's positive or negative right, that's not included in the Bill of Rights that you think should be added?
I think that a right that should be added in the Bill of Rights is a right to an education. I know our first question kind of dealt with this, but regarding the second question, the right to an education is very, very powerful. Mandela spoke to the importance of education. So whenever we fully guarantee everyone in this country a right to education, we're going to help our economy, and we're just going to help the quality of life of this entire country.
Great. Thank you very much. You are saved by the bell. Everyone can take a deep breath, breathe a sigh of relief. You're done. Great job. This is a big question. It's very broad. There are lots of different things that we could throw at you in the follow-ups, and you kind of have to be prepared for any of it. So you all did a really good job taking on all of the questions that came from all different angles. I thought it was interesting. You chose not to take a position in your prepared remarks on whether which is more important to the preservation of liberty. And that's a risky move, because you at least want to make sure you've teased out the pros and cons of both and made sure that you bring the judge to your conclusion of this is how we arrived in deadlock. That's pretty hard to do in 4 minutes when you're already covering the other things you're covering. So I think that's probably why a lot of groups end up taking a position. So just something to think about there. I will say, in response to my first question, you got the limitations that I was looking for. And Dominic, I loved, you just decided you were going to change the narrative, and you're like, I want to talk about the Fourth Amendment. And you used a good opportunity to show us something that you know, right? And use up your airtime to bring a different issue to the forefront. I also loved your answer to my second question, and how you all analyzed it differently. You could have mentioned the Eighth Amendment as a protection that prisoners do not lose once they've committed a crime, Lucas. But your response on Second Amendment and voting, I mean, those are the big ones that everyone's talking about. So, and I wanted to go talk about voting anyway, which is why I give the follow-up. So I thought you led me right into where I was going. So very good job. You all contributed well to the team. So
I want to start off by saying, wow, you're all sophomores. And it was really an amazing performance by those that are as young as you are. And I would just encourage you to be very kind to your teacher so that they will continue in this program, and that you'll be able to grow in this program, because the sky's the limit for you. Sophomores, and here you are in the national finals. So that's really quite a compliment to you and to your teacher and everybody that's helped you throughout this process. So one suggestion I would make is, when you in your introduction, we don't want to drag those out for very long, but if you're going to tell us what your favorite Supreme Court case is, give us a couple of words about why you like that Supreme Court case, because we can guess why it might be, but I'd really like to hear. My favorite Supreme Court case is Miranda versus Arizona, because whatever. So just that's just a suggestion as you go along. But this is a tough question. There's a lot in there. It's not really focused specifically on one particular amendment or one portion of an amendment. It's very broad. You don't know what the judges are going to be asking you about with these questions that we come at you from left field on. And I thought you did a good job of listening to them and responding to them and working well together as a group. Having 5 of you, that's a lot, but you did very well in sharing the load. So well done. Keep at this. You know more than most people in the country about the Constitution right now. So keep growing on that. Thank you.
I echo the comments of my fellow judges. I was very impressed that a group of sophomores could do what you just did. And I think that speaks to the value of your teacher, and ultimately to the value of this program, which, if we could encourage more civic education programs across the country, I think we would all be in a position to understand the Bill of Rights and to exercise our rights even more than we do. With regard to your presentation, I thought you got into an area that I've been thinking about when you cited Carpenter versus US and the requirement of a warrant to locate individuals according to their cell pings that are gathered by their communication system. I thought you did a good job of bringing up Brown v. Board. You listed a number of the regulations with regard to freedom of speech. you brought up the case of Shank. I would point out that the judge in that case said you can't falsely shout fire in a crowded theater. He certainly didn't say what you could do if there was actually a fire. But as long as you understand that it was falsely, I congratulate you. With regard to the additional right, I think you borrowed heavily from your first question, which of course had to do with education, but I agree with you completely that we should have a universal right to an education. And the idea that the different states can differently fund education, even though every state provides for a system of education, it is not totally universal. And a lot of the state constitutions, as you probably learned on the first question, prohibit funding for religious schools. That's an express statement in a variety of state constitutions. With regard to the different rights that you have talked about, of course, you referred to the Fourth Amendment in terms of privacy. You refer to the Fifth Amendment in terms of right to counsel. And you're right, these are things that the government must give you. And under those circumstances, that becomes a positive right. But one of the things that impressed me about your presentation is I really felt like you were speaking from the heart. I was listening to the honest opinions of a group of individuals who are going to become voting citizens, already citizens, but you're going to be part of our future government, part of our future society, and listening to how you reacted in terms of your personal feelings was very educational for me. Thank you for that. Thank you to your teacher for all the hard work that has undoubtedly been given to you in the course of your class.
Thank you all for judging. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you a ton.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes our hearing. So at this time, I'm going to offer you guys a round of applause for a job very well done. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop the recording at this time.